Uh, uh, there it goes. We're back! Season 9, Episode 6, Common Ground. This is the episode in which Patton Oswalt, Quibble Pants comes back with Meredith Salinger, Clear Sky, along with Alice Oswald, Windsprint. This is the Quibble Pants Buckball episode. If that doesn't give it a cross, I got none. This is, interesting. I've decided to arbitrarily hate this episode. What the hell? I'm serious, someone just linked me a really, interesting joke, which I'm going to share with some friends of mine here. More low-tier stuff. Again, as I've said, I've really gotten into the low-tier storytelling here. And it's awesome, and it's great, and it's wonderful. This is written by Josh Haber, by the way. We've talked about him a lot lately. He's the king of red. Right, like he is the Red King. He's just got so many red episodes under his belt. He's never gone below a green, by the way. Now, let's get this out of the way right off the bat. I've actually seen this sketch, which talks about this episode, before I saw this episode. So as soon as I saw Patton Oswalt and Meredith Salinger, I was like, oh, this is that episode. So he's actually turned this into a couple of routines. Patton Oswalt has, I mean. But he also has, the primary thing that I saw was actually an interview on the Conan O'Brien show. I sure hope not Miss Imperial started, sure, because then I need to start charging him some more money. No, so the way this works out is Patton Oswalt, I'm going to skip over some of the details. He was married. He had a child. That child is Alice Oswalt. His wife died. Then, sometime later, he met Meredith Salinger. The two got together, and they kind of went through the events of this episode. Obviously not ponies, and obviously not buckball, but that is pretty much the overall thrust of what they actually went through. You know, him trying to get her. The only difference was he was trying to get Alice to accept Meredith, as opposed to Meredith trying to get Alice to accept him. That's, other than the gender flipping, it's the exact same scenario. And apparently they did go through all of these steps and all of this stuff. One other little tidbit here, because this is also apparently a true thing. Oswalt has also mentioned several times, so he's really, really into Star Wars, as most human beings are. And he really wanted his daughter to get into Star Wars as well. She didn't. You know what she got into? MLP. Now, hang on. This is actually... I only mentioned that because it's unrelated to something else. Believe it or not, Oswalt isn't the one who reached out to them for this episode. They reached out to him because of the Conan O'Brien interview I just mentioned. Or no, not that one. It was actually something else. Sorry, the Conan O'Brien interview was after. Sorry, but the point is, they reached out to him, and that's why they involved in this. So I just thought that's kind of cool that she got to star in MLP as a consequence of that. Anyways, so we got all that out of the way. And yeah, continuity counters out the wazoo on this episode. I'm actually willing to just straight up call this an arc episode, to be honest with you. Because this episode is so dependent on multiple previous episodes for even existing. Any contradiction on that? And yeah, Miss Salinger has done some wonderful stuff over the years. Some Star Wars stuff in particular, which I'm rather fond of, ironically. She's been in a lot of stuff. And yeah, there's the MLP thing right there. That's funny. She's apparently in Daredevil, too? I didn't actually remember that. She was in 24, of course. She was in Buffy, of course. She's done a bunch of stuff. Anyways, point being. Rewind here. Yeah, you get the idea. Yeah, we're going to get a lot of arc episodes, I think, in Season 9. So, let's run through this sequentially. So, Buckball has spread. First of all, I love that, because that's actually how that tends to work in real life. Now, we haven't seen that happen in a few centuries, because most of the sports that currently exist are pretty old. But that has happened, historically speaking. You know, usually it's like one village or one town or one city or whatever starts X type of new sport. And yeah, it just... Actually, you know what? That's fair. The UFC is actually a pretty good example of that, so I take that back. You could also say wrestling is arguably kind of a thing, but that's a little bit debatable. Oh, nobody thinks esports are sports. Don't be ridiculous. Actually, truth be told, I don't know much about the history of esports. I've never researched it, so I don't know about that one. But the point is, if you check the history of most sports, like the ones I have checked and I can talk about with some authority, this type of thing does happen. Stuff just kind of spreads, right? And so it makes perfect sense that Buckball would catch on. Especially since, if we were paying attention, and I talked about this in the last Buckball episode, it's all about the concept of harmony as a physical manifestation thereof. You need an earth pony, you need a unicorn, you need a Pegasi. It's literally the equestrian sport. It just kind of stumbled into existence, but there it is, right? So simply by virtue of that, if nothing else, it would make sense that it would spread. Never mind, sports being sports, and we've already seen how sports happy a lot of the people in this setting tend to be, so duh, right? And a manager. Gotta have Snips there. It also makes perfect sense that Appaloosa would push this. Now, I promised myself, I actually made a note to myself in my notes. It says, don't get into the economics of tourism, because that's a whole topic we could talk about. But all I'm going to say in summary is that tourism is arguably one of the smartest economic models that you could push into as a political entity. Not as a corporation, but as like a city or a country or even a state. There's a lot of reason to push tourism. It's also why you see so many countries and cities and states pushing tourism. This is true, especially right now. The current pandemic we're still going through and have been for 2 years has been horrifically bad for many countries' national economies because of what it did to tourism. Remember, tourism doesn't just make money for the people with the hotels and that makes money for the state, right? It is a big net positive when it comes to financial matters, and there's lots of reasons why I could, and I swore I wouldn't go into it, so we're going to cut it off there. But my point is, first of all, of course Appaloosa would push this, because there's really only two choices. Ponyville and Appaloosa. Those were the original two teams, right? And those are the original two groups who then can stand to profit off of setting up this museum and this special Buckball stadium and all that fun stuff, right? But hang on. It makes more sense that Appaloosa would go for it than Ponyville. Why? First of all, Ponyville's actually never really been big on tourism. They're just, in all honesty, Ponyville, despite being kind of the harmony capital of the planet, is still ultimately just kind of a small little local friendly neighborhood kind of village place. They wouldn't really go for tourism in this manner. Yeah, it's a sleepy town, exactly. Second of all, Appaloosa has been pushing tourism since they first existed. I want you to think all the way back to season 1. Remember how they were like, check out all this place of Appaloosa, and then there's this thing, and then there's that thing, and we want to show you this, and we want to show you... You remember all that? Now, at the time, obviously, that was mostly just being done because he was showing off to his cousin, Applejack. But with the advantage of hindsight and world building, we could see how Appaloosa was pushing tourism from the very beginning as a way to kind of help the town stay afloat. You need something more than apples in order to push that kind of thing, right? So there's a lot of logical reasons and sense-making reasons, both economically and culturally, for Appaloosa to be the organization, the entity that is really pushing this, that has gotten the ball rolling on this, right? And yeah, eventually there will be a national league, there will be an international league. Imperial Star Destroyer mentions hippogriffs and sea ponies, and I can see so many different ways we could take that. We could probably also have, the Crystal Empire team and the Manhattan team. There's a lot of ways this could go, and we'll probably never see any of it at this point, if we're being honest with ourselves. But this is basically, there's 3 steps to world building. There's the beginning of world building, there's the in-between step where you see stuff growing, and then there's world building after the fact. Most world building you see in fiction is this third category. We recently played through Prey, and we learn a lot about the world that was in Prey, mostly because the world that is nightmarish and terrible, because Death Doom. But it's nice to see, because this is actually pretty rare, that we see a growing bit of world building in a work of fiction. So I love the way they do this. Anyway, sorry for gushing about this. I love the world building in this episode. Feeling a red, by the way. Anyways, the King of Bread strikes again. I believe so. Obviously, the movie came out, but I don't actually. When does the show come out? Does anybody know? Everything I've read, I haven't seen the movie, but everything I've read has not been overly positive about the movie. So see where that goes. But I don't want to judge that too harshly. After all, the Clone Wars movie sucked. But I actually rather liked the Clone Wars show. Oh yeah, absolutely, Imperial Star Destroyer. I mean, dragons can... Yeah, no, there's so many directions I can go with this. Anyway, sorry. Meanwhile, Snips becomes a manager, starts making money on autographs. That's true, I didn't, Ross. You're absolutely right. Well, I have no idea how it was received. I just haven't heard anything good about it, Act. If that makes any sense. I don't know how well it sold, and I don't know how well it was received. I just haven't heard anything good about it. Distinctions, you know. Anyways, I suppose I could, you know what, hang on. Because there is actually a pretty good way to gauge public opinion on something. What's the name of it? The new My Little Pony movie? I'll just look at My Little Pony, see what we come up with. The New Generation, there it is. 2021. So this is a 90% on their meter, an 87% on audience score. That's pretty high, actually. That is astonishingly high overall for Rotten... I'm going off of Rotten Tomatoes, by the way. Rotten Tomatoes is actually a pretty good generalized gauging of public opinion. Obviously, there are caveats there, but even when you see outliers, usually that helps to tell you more information. Like, it's one of those situations where the information itself gives you a good idea of where politics and opinions are trending, right? If you see a particular movie out that has like a 2% score, that's people making a statement. Doesn't actually have anything to do with the quality of the movie itself. If you see something with a 100% score, you know that's the same thing in the different direction. You get the idea, right? If you see something that has a really high tomato meter, aka the critics, and a very low audience score, that's probably like a piece that's politically relevant for something. My point is you can interpret those stats. So I do still use Rotten Tomatoes as a way to get kind of a vague net throw on opinion. Anyways, 87% on audience score is actually pretty good. I am impressed with that. I haven't seen it, obviously, no time. Not a lot of interest, if I'm being completely honest with you. Moving on. So, where were I? Snips decides to become a manager and start selling autographs, so we're seeing the financial side of things getting forward. Actually, we already see that with Apple. You'll notice, by the way, that the museum has a gift shop, and the gift shop sells stuff. And I know that's a really minor thing to point out, but that's tourism. I said I wouldn't go into it. I swear I won't. But I'm just pointing out that tourism is already generating money for a company that is probably run by the Appaloosa state. So I'm just pointing it out. So meanwhile, Rainbow Dash promised she'd look at the museum exhibits and report them to Applejack. See, this is an interesting bit of storytelling, because this makes perfect sense. Yeah, exactly, Ross. Hell, I used to... there was one place I went to in Louisville. And can anybody tell me why I went to Louisville for sports reasons? I'm actually curious if anyone knows this. Yeah, I thought so too, Imperial Star Destroyer. That's even why I pointed it down in my notes. I was like, well, let's see where they go with this. The answer is nowhere. Anyways. So... Actually, yes, I have, Ect, because CGB Grey is awesome, and more than a point, he usually does a good job of researching his topics. Hey, Jesse Ward knew. Louisville Sluggers. Almost all of the baseball bats that are actually used in both major leagues are actually, I'm saying that wrong. Most of the baseball bats used in professional baseball in the United States are produced in the Louisville Slugger factory. There, let's just put it that way. But anyways, why Rainbow Dash? Why not Applejack? So I want to pause for a moment before we keep going and talk about story construction. One of the things that I've come more and more aware of in the last several years as I both analyze and start writing my own fiction is how much you run into obstacles when it comes to writing. Okay, I want an episode about Quibble, and it has to be about Buckball, because I need the sports angle, and I want to do a little bit of world building on the side. So you put those pieces together, and what do you have? Well, okay, well then Applejack will be there, because Applejack is really big in this, and she always was, right? Well, that doesn't fit. Now, in this case, the answer is easy, because Rainbow Dash was also big into Buckball, as we saw back in the previous episode. But you see how the reason Rainbow is here is because she is the connection to Quibble. And so you have to kind of connect your plot threads via character threads like this. You have to come up with an explanation for why AJ isn't there. You have to come up with an explanation for why Rainbow is there. And then you have to use those to push the plot forwards. So because AJ isn't here, now Rainbow wants to go through the museum because AJ would have wanted to go to the museum, and she would. That is fully in character. And Rainbow would agree to do it because she's loyal and she's a good friend to AJ. The two have been good friends since season 1 at this point. And so you see how this is logical, well-constructed plot sequencing is what this actually is. All of this makes sense and lines up. You don't even have to think about it because it all lines up perfectly. The reason I'm bringing this up is because usually what I see is the exact opposite of this, where stuff happens because plot, as I like to say, where it's just like, well, this has to happen because we need to have this here. And yeah, S.A. Ross is correct. If we wanted to go with Flim and Flam instead of Quibble, we would probably try to have an episode where Dash is removed from the equation and replaced with Applejack because of the connection there. Anyways, I just wanted to comment on the good writing here, because this is good writing and Josh Haber's awesome. The King of Red continues his streak. Moving on. So, Quibble Pants shows up. Finally. Sorry, it took me a while to get there. Patton Oswalt is awesome, as usual. Yeah, it's the very first thing I mentioned, Darth Medora. I actually talked about the specifics of why they were here, too. And the marriage and the loss of his wife and all that fun stuff. And by fun, I mean absolutely horrific. So one of the things I love about Patton Oswalt's presentation, his voice acting, is that he does the thing that MLP does so well. He shows and then he tells, right? Now, I'm explaining that badly, but to explain that a little bit better, if you pay attention, within the first 2 lines he says, you can say, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing here. He's not actually a fan, he's pretending to be a fan. But it's subtle, the way he does it. Then he stumbles a bit more, and then he stumbles a lot, and then it becomes much more obvious, much more overt for the people who missed the earlier things, like the kids watching the show, that, oh, yeah, he has no idea what he's doing. It's interesting how they stagger the presentation there. And yeah, I've seen him do it. Like I said, Oswald does some great stuff. He staggers that. He does the subtle, and then he does the overt. So, what do? Well, okay, how we do figure this out? And then he opens up to Rainbow, because the two have the pre-existing connection and are friends, and he mentions, you know, her dad was big into sports too. That gives away everything, that one line. Now, they actually fleshed this out throughout the course of the episode, and it's became, the past tense. They always refer to the father in the past tense. Now, in case you missed it earlier, the real-life situation that inspired this involved a woman who died. And based on the way they showcased this, it is pretty likely that what happened to her father, the pony, who they never name, I don't think, also similarly passed away. Now, they never confirmed that, because they're really harsh about not confirming those kind of things in this show. We've talked about this before, like with regards to Applejack's parents, for example. But yeah, something probably happened, and there's a reason why they consistently refer to him in the past sense. Obvious implications are obvious. Anyways, it also gives away the mentality. This is actually really cool, and is the kind of thing I have seen happen in real life, and I've seen parodied in real life, and I'm not sure what I think of that. It actually kind of pisses me off a little bit. Let me explain what I mean by that. How many of you have seen, usually a comedy, usually some kind of stupid, teen comedy or kids comedy, where there's the loving mother and the loving kids and the guy who wants to date her, and it's like a versus thing, right? He wants the approval of the kids, but they'll never give it, and then shenanigans and pranks and garbage, right? I hate those kind of comedies personally. Sorry, no offense to anybody who likes them. I actually saw one of those recently. My brother-in-law was watching one of those, and I can't even remember the name of it. Give me a second here. Give me a second. I'll tell you the name of this movie. This is just going to take me a minute, because I got to figure out the name of the guy who starred in it, which is Ice Cube. There we go. And then I just need to come up with the name of the movie, which was... it's somewhere around here. I can't remember the name of it. I don't think I can find it now. Damn! Oh, well. It's a movie that Ice Cube is in. He's the guy. The kids are, like, really, really, really bad about how they are just absolutely destroying his life and just, screw you, that kind of thing. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Hang on for a second here. Oh, gosh. Imperial Starter Shirt. There's a thought. And that would fit, too, wouldn't it? I do like how Sky tells him to dial it back the entire episode. It might be Bebe's Kids. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Point being, I hate that kind of crap. There's 2 reasons I hate that kind of crap. First of all, it's your typical exaggerative comedy, and I just don't care for physical comedy in general. Someone getting hit in the face with a that is it. That's it, Darth Medora. Are we there yet? That's absolutely it. Hang on, let me verify that. Why was that not on that list? Yeah, that's it. Why was that not on the list? Yeah, it's Ice Cube. It's weird. And it even came out in the range I thought it was. Yeah, 2005. I was looking in the mid-aughts. Whatever. Thank you, Darth Medoro. Don't watch that movie. It sucks. Anyways, you know, someone getting smacked in the face with a baseball bat doesn't really strike me as appealing. It's not funny to me. But there is another reason this pisses me off, and I swear this is related to the episode. That's why I'm bringing this in here. I always try to tie all this stuff together. The other reason I tend to dislike those kind of things is it creates kind of a cultural consciousness / perspective of the creepy guy who only wants with the hot woman and doesn't care about the kids. And is only getting good with the kids to get with the woman. Now, I'm a little biased on this matter, because I'm a guy. But I have actually known several examples of this in real life where the gentleman in question has wanted to legitimately be a part of the family unit, and therefore actually really does want to reach out to the kids in question. And it's not just accepting them as payment, as something they have to deal with in order to get with the person they want to be with. Now, what does this have to do with this episode? It is very obvious, and it is made very clear multiple times that Quibble obviously does give a damn. He flat out states to the camera, he tells us to Rainbow, that they are a family, that Sky and Sprint are a family, and if they don't accept him, then he doesn't want to mess with that. He doesn't want to be a part of that. No matter how much he loves... God, I'm trying to get the names clear here. I keep wanting to say Meredith. No matter how much he will love Sky, unless Sprint also likes him, he doesn't want to get involved in that. He doesn't want to screw that up, to be the odd man out. And he really does actually want to make this work in a legitimate manner. And yeah, we got to reference Q every day. That's true, Loner. That is something that I've seen entirely too much, and it's actually kind of irritating. But anyways, so I know this sounds so stupid, but it's kind of nice to see a simple, standard, heartwarming person who really does love a woman and her child, and wants to be a part of that family. So I just wanted to comment on that really quick. It only took me about 5 minutes to get there. Meanwhile, they mentioned that her dad was a pretty good flyer. This leads to Imperial Star Destroyer's comment about maybe it being one of the washouts, which... Then, this gets interesting in its own right. Now, what happens here is fascinating. What happens is the solution before the end of the episode. Now, if you've been paying attention, MLP pulls this trick several times. This was just recently with Yona comes up with when the tree was destroyed. And Yona has the answer like at the midway point of the episode, and then because the episode can't end, everyone says no, and then we have shenanigans, and then we get right back to where we were at the middle of the episode. The same thing happens here if you pay attention. What happens is Uprooted, thank you, is he brings out the book, and he's read through the book, and he started studying it and understanding it in his own geeky way, and that suddenly becomes a method by which he can reach out to and have a bridge point. So this is something I've talked about a lot. When it comes to trying to have common interests, some people think you need to be interested in the same things in the same ways, but that's actually not true. Bridging the gap and trying to have a connection between someone can also mean just one person being interested in something and another person being interested in the same thing but in a different way, or maybe the same thing in a different concept, or the same way in a different concept. There's multiple ways that these connections can happen. And so we see this. He's into the math, the statistics. How many of you know a sports geek? You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, sure, there's the people who like to watch sports. That's fine. No judgment. I know I will not be playing a video game with my friend tonight because he's going to be watching the Chiefs game tonight, you know? No judgment. But a sports geek is the person who will be able to tell you the figures and the stats and the plays and why that playoff went that way, or why they disagree with that call, or what kind of percentage chance this has with that, or how the maneuvers are working, or why it's interesting that this person has been moved to this team as a result of this contract change. Right? I've said this before. I've seen geeks of all types. Geek is just another word for enthusiast. I have seen geeks of all kinds of stuff. And what we have here is he is legitimately a sports geek. It catches him immediately. You saw that, right? Of all the sports stuff they try in the episode, the only thing that catches him is the stats. which makes sense. That's the kind of thing he's into. It engages his brain. That sounds bad. What I mean by that is it engages him in a way he enjoys. I don't mean to sound that like someone who just enjoys sports for sports isn't stupid. That's not what I'm saying. Don't take it that way. What I mean is he's far more of what I usually call an intellectual person rather than a visceral person, right? A visceral person likes to get out there and do or see or watch, and an intellectual person likes to understand and analyze a thing. I'm actually both myself, but you get the idea, right? And yeah, fantasy football is literally D&D for jocks. So yes, wind sprint, visceral. Dash, visceral, absolutely. They actually like to get out there and do and watch and be. And I mean, even the way they do some wonderful animation. How does she go into the museum? Well, ignoring the fact that she's literally dragged there by her mother. I'm trying to think how to explain this. Her movements are slight. Like, she's just kind of doing small steps. And she's just kind of walking. Like, her head isn't really bowed. I shouldn't do that. But she's just kind of... There's no animation to her movement. She's not animated. This is so hard to explain when I'm talking about an animated work. But you get my point, right? There's not a lot of energy to her movements. She's just da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. But then, hey, let's go watch the match. She takes off. She actually flies and does a loop in the air and then lands like, hey, the energy is completely different. God, I love the animation of this frickin' show. Anyways. So, we have the solution. We have the bridge point. He's into the stats. She's into the viscerality. And this falls apart immediately. And I would rewatch this scene twice to really get through this. And it made perfect sense to me. Even though I still think this is a bit of a narrative cheat. Because it is the solution, as the end of the episode shows. Oh, he's a sorcerer, in D&D terms, absolutely. I forget what the classes are in Ogres and Oubliettes, which is why I stuttered there for a second. But he's a sorcerer. Anyways. So... yeah, we gotta have dumb hijinks, but before we get to the dumb hijinks, I want to talk about why it makes sense that the initial attempt to bond with her over the book doesn't work. A, he's still trying too hard. He's also lying. But B, well, she's anti-him. Right? Like, until she has the talk with her mom towards the end of the episode, Sprint is obviously anti-Quibble. She is pro-dad. She's always bringing up her dad. She's saying how her dad was better at this, and she's just not willing to give him an inch. Two people reaching out, right? Needs two people reaching out. He is reaching out. He's reaching a little bit too hard. But if she doesn't reach out at all, it doesn't matter if it's a logical connection point or whatever. They're never going to connect. And yeah, exactly. As she flat out says later, I don't like the fact that he's trying to replace dad. It is then her mother who has to set her right on that. He's not trying to replace your dad. He's trying to be friends with you. He's trying to get you to like him. Admittedly, this is another one of those episodes that, if we're being honest, wraps up entirely too quickly. This is the kind of thing that usually takes weeks or months or years to actually go through. But obviously we don't have that in a 22-minute show, so I'm willing to give that a little bit of a pass. This is then when we get to the shenanigans part of the episode. Now, as you might imagine, as we've been talking... How long has this gone on so far? We've been talking for 28 minutes. We've already talked longer than the episode. When we get to the actual shenanigans, which actually, numbers-wise, is the majority of the episode, I have the least to say about it. It's shenanigans. He can't hit the ball, even though it's crawling at inch speed. He can't run more than 1 inch. All of this is just nonsense for the sake of comedy, and it's physical comedy, which I mentioned earlier I'm not into on purpose, because this episode does that several times. Because this is just... Sure. I actually agree with that, Weods. Nevertheless, yeah, this is in character for Dash, and this is obviously the direction she would go with. I just want to point out that A, he's an Earth pony who are known to be magically augmented to be stronger and all that fun stuff. But B, and more to the point, we've literally seen him be faster and stronger and quicker than this on camera before, so this is all just jokes for the sake of joke's sake. Whatever. This then leads to, you know, more shenanigans, and then everything's cool. And then there's everything's kind of cool. This then leads to a weird scene. Yeah, she doesn't like Dairy Do. She's not athletic enough. What? Also, there's this really cool line where she says, and books are lame. And Rainbow says, first of all, books are awesome. And second of all, and then she goes back to her book. I just like how Rainbow had to slide that in there. Anyways, what happens then is a scene that's actually kind of heartwarming and surprisingly well designed. So what happens is he's brought down to the field, and Pinky and Fluttershy both walk up and say something to him. Now, I'm going to give you the structure of this scene really quick. So, yeah, exactly. So Pinky says, embarrassing fact about you. And Fluttershy says, oh, embarrassing fact about you. And then Quibble goes, and then Rainbow's like, oh, but he's super awesome. You know, and that's the structure of that scene, right? The reason I bring it up that way is because it's presented in that manner, but if you pay attention to what they're saying, they are complimenting him. That they are getting across the point that while he was a little bit hard to get used to and hard to be friends with, he was legit in the end, and they did end up becoming friends, and they are in fact still friends. Rainbow and Quibble are actually pretty tight this whole episode. You notice that? I like to think that they've kept in correspondence this whole time, right? I mean, why wouldn't they? So I look at this like, okay, that's actually pretty smart and pretty nuanced of a take on that. You'll notice the mother then says this outright. Once again, we show and then we tell. The mother says, what I'm hearing is that he's hard to get used to, but once you do, you like him more and more over time. I know people like that in real life. I know people who, to put this simply, have a high barrier to entry to be friends with them. But once you get past that barrier, you know, they're legit, right? I'm not going to name names. I don't want to call anyone out, but I do know people like that. I have become friends with quite a few people in my years that I was pretty much the only friend because I was the only one who pushed through that initial barrier, right? And yeah, Sky's pretty awesome the whole episode, so... Anyways, this then leads to the haha joke. And this awesome scene then gets thrown to hell because they decide to actually do a match. So, gotta get a little more shenanigans in. I admit I don't like this at all. That being said, it's amusing to me that he bothered to try and pull out the rules book and technically his way to victory. I'm glad they didn't go through with that. He just pulled that out and then they're like, no, stop. This is dumb. I don't want to play this game. I'm not having fun and I don't want to be with you. Okay, that sucks. And by the way, I hope I never have to hear that about myself from my adorable niece, because that would probably absolutely destroy me. You'll notice Quibble is pretty destroyed by that. So then he has his big scene with Rainbow where he just lays it all out, and Patton Oswalt sells this scene, by the way. And then finally he's like, okay, you know what, I'm just going to go, I'm going to be honest about it, this is going to be my last attempt, and if you say no, done. Okay, fine, whatever. This then leads to the heartwarming scene I've actually already referenced, where Sky and Sprint talk with each other for the first time. And yeah, Sprint admits that he's trying to make me forget about Dad, he's trying to replace my dad, and it's like, no. And she lays that down, we have some honest communication, and then they bond over the fact that they have a shared interest, as I mentioned earlier. He's into the geek stat side of things, he's into the intellectual side of things, she's into the visual side of things, but they're both into the thing, and that leads to them bonding over that, and they share some stuff, and that's cool. And then the episode ends really badly, like out of absolutely nowhere. It's like they have a perfect ending thing, and they had to get that one last weird line in, which makes no sense at all. It almost feels like it was part of the script that wasn't supposed to be in the script. Well, he did still have to buy you the gift. The end. Wait, what? I honestly feel like that was something that someone scrawled in the margins that shouldn't have gotten to the final spec script. Weird. And yeah, I noticed that too, Ross. Yeah, he also points out the Pinky action too, because, again, he was legitimately into the stat side of things. He wasn't making that up. But that's the episode. So let's be clear about this. This is I'd say about 60, maybe 50% of an extremely well-written episode, and extremely personal, and there's a lot of heart on display, great acting, great animation, fantastic writing, and then there's shenanigans. Now, I didn't care for the shenanigans. I've made that opinion quite clear. I also have nothing to say about it other than shenanigans. I do think that absolutely drags its score down, personally, because not only is it unnecessary to have the first tidbit of shenanigans, but the second tidbit of shenanigans was actually kind of bad. The first bit I could have forgiven. But then she decides to go ahead and have an actual match with the current tournament champion leads, and that's the scene that didn't work for me at all. Like the "we'll totally make you look good" thing. No, that was just okay. Yep, all right. Yeah, I wouldn't blame you, Imperial Star Destroyer. I will probably remember the family connection part of this for some time. I'll probably reference it in future episodes, even when we cover things that aren't MLP. I doubt I will ever remember the shenanigans of this episode. They're just there. I'm seeing several people seeing orange here. And admittedly, it is a shame for the King of Red to not get a red. But I do have to admit, the shenanigans do absolutely drag it down. It is definitely above average, I think. So I think orange would be considered the floor in this case. Without shenanigans, see, I admit I also have a very strong personal connection to this because obviously I have a great investment in my niece continuing to enjoy hanging out with me. I know there's a little bit of the lack of confidence talking there, if I'm being honest. But every now and again I do worry that there will come a day where she will not be excited to see me. You know, just last week, I went over and I was like, and she was watching something, so she didn't jump up and say anything. And there was just that pang, right, of, oh, this is it. She's not excited to see her uncle. Okay, I can deal with it. And so I'm talking with her mother, and we're dealing with something. And then whatever she was watching stopped, and she jumped up and then ran into me, like tackle glomped me. I was like, So I admit I do have a little bit more personal investment in this kind of an episode than I otherwise would. So, yes, they are, Weods, I agree. And that's the problem. I really think the shenanigans are actually legitimately to the detriment of the episode. Even if they are at best bland, which they are at best bland, they are... You could mix and match just about whoever you wanted into those pieces, and you wouldn't even have to change the format of the structure of it. So as much as... I'm sorry about this whole talk around. I think this pulls this down to an orange. I think this could easily be a red. I could probably personally vouch for this being a purple, if not for the... And the problem is it's not just the shenanigans. Remember, they take up a fairly large portion of the episode. It's at least 40% of the runtime is shenanigans. And that, like, if it was one scene, okay, sure, whatever. I can live with that. But instead, it's a huge chunk of the episode. Nevertheless, the King of Red is still just way up there in terms of quality, and I don't want to sound too derogatory about that. Next week, what are we covering next week? Let's see here. Season 9, hang on. So next up is She's All Yak, which I can probably guess based on the title what that's going to be about, and Frenemies, which I have no idea what that's about. That could be whatever. And as usual, I'm not reading any of that, so next week, I need to kill chaos. For now, I'm going to go get some groceries and then go get some work done on the theater. I will be seeing the rest of you Tuesday, when we will be continuing Sunless Sea, and otherwise I'll see all the rest of you next Sunday.